What I want to talk about today as a one-off class is something that we say in the morning in our davening, every morning. We ask Hashem to help us be modeh al ha'emet. Remember that from the morning? Yeah? Hashem, help me to be modeh al ha'emet. What does that mean? Anyone know what does modeh mean? First things every morning is modeh ani lefanecha. Yeah, thanks, like to thank. Right, but modeh, the word really means to admit. Right, to admit something. They come from the same. It's strange that in Hebrew, at least at first glance, that in Hebrew the word for to admit something and to thank somebody are the same word, exactly the same word. If you think a little more deeply about it, you can understand that, by definition, if I'm thanking you, I'm admitting that I couldn't do it by myself, I needed you. Right, so it's kind of putting yourself in that position of, thanking someone, of admitting that I was in need and you supplied that need. So what stops a person from doing that? I mean, we're davening for it, right? We're saying, Hashem, please help me to be modeh, to thank and to admit, al ha'emet, to admit what the truth is, to see what's right. What stops? Pride. Another word for pride, that we use all the time? Gaiva is, good, the Hebrew word, ga'ava. If you're Ashkenazi, you pronounce it gaiva, Ga'ava means pride, haughtiness, or ego, we call it, right? That's how we mostly talk about it, ego. Which is not an exact use of the word ego, but whatever, we talk about it like that, What we mean is, there's an ego stake, there's a pride stake. I don't want to admit that I was wrong. So it's a difficult thing to admit you're wrong. And one of the hardest skills to learn in yeshiva is, you're sitting learning a Gemara. It's probably never happened to any of you, but it's happened to me. And you say something and it's pretty wrong, right? And then you find out 2 or 3 minutes later when you read the next line of the Gemara, or your chavrusa says something that makes it quite clear that you're pretty wrong. And then you have an internal battle. Oh, I have an internal battle. You guys, I'm sure it never happened to you, but I have an internal battle of, okay, what do I do now? Do I keep arguing this? Do I keep fighting, even though I really know this is, do I keep trying to convince him that I'm right? And I might be able to. I mean, if you're superior in arguing skills and maybe in knowledge of certain things to this guy, you could convince him, right? You can carry on battering, and eventually he'll either give up or he'll decide he doesn't care anymore, and you win. But the battle is, do you do that? Or do you say, yeah, I'm wrong. I was wrong. Let's move on. Much harder to do. But that's what we're about, right? When you're learning, the whole idea is to get to the truth. That's the whole Gemara set up like that. You have the Mishnah, and then we try to understand, what does the Mishnah mean? Right? And you have these big sages saying, I think it's this, I think it's that, and this boxing match of battles between one and the other. And eventually, the Gemara will say, Tufta, that's it. This guy's out. Knockout punch, that's it. Sometimes they try and come back, sometimes not, but it's about learning when you have to fight your corner. But when you see I'm being boxed in and so there's a point where you have to say, listen, okay, I realize. And you have to learn that there's no ego stake in that. There is an ego stake. You have to learn to give up your ego stake in that. You have to learn to say, I'm not interested in self-aggrandizement. I'm not here to show you why I'm right. And this happens all the time. As I'm speaking honestly with you, as a rabbi, this happens all the time. You're learning with somebody and you say something which is not quite right in the Gemara. It doesn't quite fit. It happens. We all do this. And through no fault of your own, through fault of your own, but in the normal course of things, it happens all the time. I learn with my chavrusa. You make a mistake, you come back, you correct yourself. So, you have a student and you're supposed to be teaching him and he points out something, so then you have to say, you're right, mistake, sorry, and move on. That's something which when I first came to yeshiva many years ago, right, was difficult. It was difficult to get to that, and it's not a midah, it's not a character trait that you find out there in the world. The ability to say, you know what, I was wrong, let's move on. I heard once that someone went to Rabbi Yoshev. This one I happened to have heard from someone who said he was there, so I don't know. Okay, it's a nice story. So Rabbi Yoshev was once asked a certain question, and he was asked, the question's not important, is it A or B? Is it asur or mutter? And he answered to this guy, it's mutter. It's mutter, it's allowed. Somebody who was there in the audience, a whole bunch of followers, hangers-on, who sat around there listening to his every word. Someone, had the chutzpah to say, the Rabbi said, I was here 10 years ago, and the Rabbi was asked exactly the same question, and you said it was asur. So Rabbi Yosef looked at him and went, I'm not allowed to learn? In the meantime, I learned, I changed my mind. I was wrong. So even the greatest can be wrong. This is something we have to, what's the likelihood that, you're going to get better pshat than the Rambam? Not massive. But could it be? theoretically. Yeah. Humans are humans. Humans are fallible. We make mistakes. But we have that ego stake that prevents us from saying that. So one of the hardest things about learning is to realize, is to internalize this idea that we're not here to prove who's right. I'm not here. When I'm sitting with my chavrusa, I present my pshat, he presents his pshat. The goal here is not that I should be right and he should be wrong. The goal is you should be equally happy if at the end of the day he shows you comprehensively why you're wrong and he's right and you understand it. In fact, you might understand it better and you might never forget it now that he showed you, he whipped you into showing you why you're wrong. The idea is to get to what's right at the end. The idea is not to show how right I am. And what prevents that is ego. And we have to work on that. We have to work on the idea that I can be wrong. So to examine ego, I want to go back to the Haftorah that we read on Shabbos in Shul. Okay, so if you open up your Chumashim over here, it's on page 1214, 1214, as you Americans like to say, 1214. See, I'm multilingual. I married an American. I can speak American. American. I told you my daughter corrects my English when I don't pronounce it in American or say different things. Yeah. She tells me when I tell her it's a tiger. One time she told me, "No, Daddy, it's a tiger." So that's what I said, tiger. She said, "Not tiger, tiger." You know. So it's okay. I'm used to it. Fine. So what you guys remember the story? The story over here. This is from the book of Shmuel, of Samuel, right? So Samuel was the prophet, and the king of Israel. The first king, really, of Israel at this time was Shaul, who was known in English as Saul. Yeah, Shaul. It's a s in English because in Greek they don't have a sh sound. So instead of writing Saul, they wrote Shaul. They wrote Saul because they had no sh, right? And then we mispronounce it instead of Saul as Saul. Okay. The history of all these names is fascinating, but not our topic. But a lot of them are really crazy in how they're mispronounced. You wouldn't even spot them. One of my favorites is Shoshana and Susanna. It's the same word, but you wouldn't spot it.
Christopher Columbus. Do you know his
Columbus.
Name? You know his name was?
What was his name?
Cristobal Colon.
Cristobal Colon. Makes sense. Okay. We try and go back to the original text as much as possible. Right? It doesn't make sense to learn from a translation if you have the original. So here we have the original, at least on one side, and let me show you what it is I want to point out. So the king was Shaul, right? Now what happened was, in the war against Amalek, the war against the Amalekites, the king of whom was somebody called Agag. Right? These were an incredibly cruel people. They would capture Jews and torture them at any given opportunity. And the command came directly from Hashem, kill them, every single last one of them. Do not spare anyone. Okay? Which is a difficult command. It's not what I want to talk about right now. But at least you should know that the Rambam at least says that there seems to be a sort of difference of opinion amongst the whole thing about exactly how this worked, the war against Amalek. But the Rambam certainly says that before you go to war even against Amalek, you offer them peace. And if they're willing to stop acting the way they are and make peace with you, and they're not acting like Amalek anymore, then you don't go to war with them. At least the Rambam says that. And Rashi does say that you're allowed to take converts from them as well if they want to become Jewish. So it's not as extreme as you may think at first, although it certainly is an extreme command. But in any event, the prophet comes to Shaul and he tells him, kill them all, every last one. And what does Shaul do?
Spares the life of the king.
Good. And some sheep.
Huh?
And some sheep. Yeah? Doesn't kill the sheep. Yeah? In fact, you'll hear on Purim, not on Purim, you should have heard on Shabbos, I don't know if you were in Shul on Shabbos, the Baal Koreh over here who reads the Haftorah, the words that we'll see is when the prophet says to him, wait, if you killed everything, you did what Hashem said, so what is the noise of the sheep that I hear? And the word there, the word for Hebrew for what is ma, but sometimes it can have an air vowel as well. So here it happens to be umeh. Yeah, so he always does that in like a sheep impression. He says umeh. That was quite funny. He did that on Shabbos. So every now and then the new people are like, what did the Bakar just do? Why is he? But yeah. Anyway, so he spares them. He spares Agag's life. In the interim, yeah, he ends up. The prophet Shmuel ends up killing him the next day, right, when he finds out that Shaul left him alive. But in the interim, in that period, that night, he had relations with a certain woman, and that means that the Amalek nation, race, whatever, is continued and ends up.
He was the only Malach left.
He was the only one left. Yeah, and I don't know how much it was, 12 hours, whatever, less than a day that he was alive was enough to continue, and that led to Purim. Yeah, it led to, that's all I mentioned, Purim, don't worry, I know we had enough Purim the last few days. But that led to the whole, all these disasters and the continuation of this force that wants to destroy the Jewish people. So it was a massive problem. So what the parts I want to learn with you, we'll just select verses, are parts where he's confronted by the prophet Shmuel about not having done what he was told. So look first at verse 13, which is on the next page, 12:15. Yud Gimel. Oh, the previous. Let's look at Yud Base. Yeah, 12. So it says that Shmuel woke up early in the morning and he went to go meet Saul. And it was told to Samuel, saying, Saul's come to the Carmel, he set up an altar, etc. Right? So now you have this scene. Imagine King Saul has not done what he was supposed to do, right? And you have the prophets going to inquire as to how the war went. So he's walking up towards him. And so it says, Samuel came to Saul. Saul said to him, he sees him coming into the room, and he says, Blessed are you to Hashem. Hi, in English. Yeah? How's it going? Before the conversation even starts, what does he say? I fulfilled the word of Hashem. Starts out, preempting. Yeah? I did it. I did what you said. So Shmuel responds back to him, as we mentioned earlier, oh yeah? So what's the sound of the sheep and the cattle that I hear? Like, what's going on? Suddenly you've got some sheep. What happened, right? In modern day parlance, it would be, but you went over there and did them. But look, you took their Lamborghinis and their Ferraris and everything. All their stuff's here, or their iPhones are sitting here. You're supposed to destroy it all, the property. You're not supposed to take any spoils. Saul said, "Yeah, I brought them from the Amalekites." What do you say? For the people took pity on the best of the sheep, but we have destroyed the remainder. What's that? What does he say? Excuse. What's the excuse? It's the people. The people took pity. It wasn't me. It wasn't nothing to do with me. The people took pity. So I acquiesced to what the people said. But we've destroyed the remainder, everything else we did. Yeah? I managed to persuade those people to do what Hashem wanted. The rest of them good. So then we're going to skip the next couple of verses, but basically Shmuel says, nothing doing, that's not what Hashem wanted. And he says to him in verse 19, why did you not obey the voice of Hashem? You rushed to the loot and you did what was evil in the eyes of Hashem. Next verse. Saul said to Samuel, but I heeded the voice of Hashem and I walked on the path that Hashem sent me. Again, no, I did it. You don't understand, I did it. Imagine, you have the prophet of God standing in front of you, and yet you're still, I did it, I really did. The people took the sheep and the cattle from the loot. Shmuel said, the next verses we'll just skip, but he says basically Hashem doesn't want all this stuff. He's rejected you as king. Then Shaul says to Samuel, this is like the third stage. This is verse 24 at the bottom of the page. I have sinned. What do we have now? Now we have the first admission. I did something wrong. He says, I've sinned. Since I've transgressed the word of Hashem and your word. I'm now on the next page. For I have feared the people and obeyed their voice. What do we have there? Rationalization. We're getting progress. We have, I sinned. I did something wrong. Now he's admitting he did something wrong. But I did it because I was afraid of the people and I listened to them. And now please forgive my sin and return with me and I'll prostrate myself to Hashem. He wants to do tshuva. But what's missing? There's an excuse there. Rationalization. Again. He says to him, no, I won't return with you. You rejected the word of Hashem. Hashem's rejected you as king. Then he grabs his cloak as his tunic as he tries to walk away. And then look at verse 30. This is towards the end of Torah. He said, I've sinned. In Hebrew, that's one word. Chatasi. That's it. And after that, Shmuel says to him, fine, I'll go with you. I see that you've done tshuva. I think you see here a paradigm of how human beings react. That's all the text that you're going to need. I think you see a paradigm of how human beings react when they've done something wrong and they're confronted with it. Number one, everything's fine. Nothing happened. I've done the word of Hashem. I've done what Hashem said. Nothing's really wrong over here. Hashem doesn't really want these things. I'm great. I'm okay, Jack. That's what they say, right? No problem. Okay, then you're forced to admit that, hey, everything's not quite so okay. So the second reaction is, all right, fine, so something's wrong, but it wasn't me. I didn't do anything wrong. It was someone else's fault. Shift the blame. I think that's the second. The third is, okay, it was me, right? But it wasn't really my fault. Yeah, I listened to the voice of the people. There was a lot of pressure, right? They were telling me they wanted this, they wanted that. Third stage. Fourth stage, yeah, model emes. That's kind of how it goes. And of course, there can be multiple stages, and there could be sub-stages, etc., etc. But I think that's kind of how our first natural reaction is. Everything's fine, and then someone else, and then okay, I did it, but it's someone else's fault. They really influenced me. If it weren't for those people around me, I wouldn't have done it. And then you come to this idea that you just say chatasi, I did something wrong. We don't need the reasons. Hashem knows the reasons. Yeah, person has to come to realization that I did stuff wrong. I am not perfect. Right? I said something. My pshat in the Gemara was wrong. Chatasi. Move on. When you do that, so first of all, you're learning to be a less egotistical person. That's the first thing. You're training yourself that this is not about ego, it's not about me, which is a very important thing, to quash that ego, to realize that it doesn't matter. And secondly, it means that you can get to true stuff more, and you can work on yourself, and you can correct stuff, because the first step to getting better is to admit that there's something wrong. You say, I did this thing wrong. Okay, next time I'll try again, I'll try better. But if you're stuck the whole time in not wanting to admit that something happened and something's wrong, so it's very, very difficult for you to make any progress in anything. One of the mistakes that we make a lot is to think that because something looks like it's a small act, so we think, what's the difference? It doesn't make such a big difference. I heard a story about a man who was a teacher. He was a teacher in a school. He actually did a teaching course, yeshiva course, and he went to go teach in a yeshiva in a certain country. I won't tell you where it is because you don't need to know who the guy is. And he was teaching there. And what happened was this little boy comes to school. The boy is from a non-religious family, but he sent the family a little traditional, and they sent the boy to this yeshiva-type high school. The boy comes in. I guess it was not high school, junior school. I guess he was first grade, whatever. He comes in, and he learns the first day, and he goes home, and his mother asks him, Johnny, let's call him Johnny. Says, Johnny, Shlomi, let's call him Shlomi. So Shlomi, what did you learn today in school? He says, well, today I learned that, you know how you put on your shoes in the morning? You take the right shoe and you put it on your right foot. And then you take the left shoe and you put it on your left foot. And then you tie the left lace, and then you tie the right lace. His mother looks at him and was like, that's what they taught you? He was like, yeah. He's like, okay. So he goes back. And the next day, the teacher teaches the same thing again. Goes home, and his mother says, what did you learn in school today? He says, well, I learned you take your right shoe on first, and second, then you put your left shoe on, and then you tie your left shoe, and you tie your right shoe. She's like, what is going on over here? Third day, the same thing happens. I'm sure they learned some other stuff, but this is what what was being emphasized by his Rabbi. Anyway, the mother was very upset that the boy was busy with such small nonsense, and so she takes him out of the school. Sends him to a public school, whatever. It happens that the Rebbe got fired. Rebbe got fired from his job as a result of this case. She complained, she was a big macher in the community. Rebbe got fired. 25 years later, this Rebbe, he's now a principal somewhere in a different school, gets a phone call from a guy. Says, you probably don't remember me, my name is Shlomi. I just wanted to thank you. He says, what do you mean you wanted to thank me? So I want you to know I went to a public school. I basically abandoned anything to do with Judaism. I went to university. I was in the football team, and I was going out with one of the cheerleaders, and decided I was going to marry her. And at the wedding, my mother was helping me get dressed, and she handed me my shoes, and she handed me my left shoe first. And I took the shoe, and I was about to put it on my foot, and I said, no, Mom, that's the other shoe. I have to put on my right shoe first. And he said, and I broke down and started crying, and I canceled the wedding. I said, and I want you to know that I went to seek out the local rabbi, and I'm on my way back to becoming an observant Jew. An unbelievable story. You never know, small things, right? A rabbi that I once met, he became a religious person from seeing a boy in the street in Tel Aviv He was in Israel just visiting. There was a boy in the street in Tel Aviv who was walking along, and they had these, billboards that you guys probably don't notice, but they have billboards of scantily clad women around. I know you guys for sure way beyond that, but they have these things, right? And this little Hasidic boy, he was maybe, I don't know, 10 years old, 12 years old, yeah? This rabbi, then he wasn't a rabbi, he noticed the little boy walking in the street. The little boy looked around, he saw this poster, and he looked down and carried on walking. And he looked and he went, how is that possible? I mean, let's not get into the rights and wrongs of whether or not, what a person shouldn't be looking at. But how is it possible that a 10-year-old, 12-year-old boy with all sorts of hormones flying around, and how's it possible that he's able to control himself like that, to say, I'm not going to look at that? And he was so impressed, he said, I have to find out more. How they're able to do this. And that was the beginning of his journey. Now that little boy, I don't know what ever became of him. No idea. Could be he never made anything of his life. Could be he became some massive Rabbi somewhere, I don't know. But for sure, when they upstairs are calculating, all the good stuff he did in his life, that one little act of saying, I'm not going to look at that, when he was, 12 years old, look at the ramifications, look at the ripple effects of everything that happened because of that. And you may never know. The boy never know. He didn't know who was looking at him. He doesn't know what thoughts are going in everyone's mind around it. You never know, the smallest little thing. You're walking around in the yeshiva and you give someone a smile. You don't know, maybe he's having a rough day. Yeah? You're walking around in the streets in Yerushalayim, and some guy looks at you gruffly, and you ask him how he is, and he tells you something, and you say, wow, that's really tough, I'm sorry, man, and you give him a pat on the shoulder. And because of you, that day he doesn't beat his wife. Yeah.
Does it work in the opposite way?
Yeah, yeah.
So you're liable for someone else's actions based on one little thing with you?
So you're not liable. So the way it works is like this. This is actually a very good question. If you don't mind, I'm going to do a rabbi thing and answer it in a long way. Give you a principle, because I think it's an important enough question. Of course, I should clarify, the good, the benefit that this boy is getting is not the same as if he'd actually done it himself, right? Because it was, what he's getting is, that's the ripple effect of his action. Meaning that action inherently could cause these things, right? So what you're getting is to the extent that, that can be attributed to you as opposed to anybody else, right? So you have to be, there's a cosmic accounting that goes on here that no human could do, right? Obviously, in Shemayim, they're able to discern what's what. So firstly...
So even if no one had seen him do that, it would be this, you would garner the same positive benefit.
That's a very interesting point. I don't think so, because at the end of the day, it didn't happen, but certainly he gets benefit, he gets a lot of benefit, meaning he gets a lot. I don't know exactly how it's going to work out, in terms of putting all the pieces in play and why, because at the end of the day, right, it's not, he doesn't know whether anyone has seen it or not, so why should he get more or less because of what this guy does? But there is such a concept that sometimes you happen to be in the right place. Maybe it's because of other things that you've done, where Hashem makes your small actions have bigger consequences. But I don't claim to know exactly how it's tallied up in Shemayim. But this much I know. Our sages say that on the day of judgment, we're talking Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur time, so it says around that time, the living and the dead are judged. So I understand the living are judged, right? What do? They look at everything you did good and everything you did bad, and they weigh it up or whatever it is, and they come to, this is what you need to do tshuva for, this is what whatever. But what does it mean to say the dead are judged? The dead are dead. They didn't do anything. The definition of being dead is that they can't make decisions now. They have no free will. It's not the only definition of being dead, but it's one of them, right? They're out of the world where you can do a mitzvah. You can't make a free will decision to do that or that. So you can't say, if without free will, the person can't get reward or punishment. So you can't what are you judging? They didn't do anything. So the answer is, as you say, that only, when the only way that a person can be, the person's soul can get judged or rejudged, let's call it, in the next world, is by what they did when they were here. So every action, every single little action you do, right, that you leave behind in this world has ripple effects, and that has ripple effects, and that has ripple effects, and it branches out on forever. That's why we name buildings after people, or we do things in the memory of some. It's not just an empty token that I want their name to blaze, to be, in shining lights on the side of the building, or I give money in their name because it makes me feel good or whatever. No, when I do a mitzvah, for the memory of my father, I'm actually doing it for him. If he hadn't existed, I wouldn't be. That's one of the reasons your parents, any mitzvah he does, this counts to their benefit. That you do counts to their benefit. But if I do something special that I would never have done were it not for this person, so of course they're getting benefit for that. I do too. But they also get, because to the extent that their existence in this world prompted me to do something, they get rejudged for it. Yeah.
Does that only apply for dead people? So could you do like a mitzvah or whatever in the name of a living person? And equally...
Absolutely. It would work also. You can, it's sort of how davening for other people works. Yeah. Oh, that's another big topic that we have to talk about another time. But yeah. That's it works like that all the time. Any effects of your action. Now, when a parent raises a kid, right? So the child is held accountable from the time when at least the time when he gets to Yitzchak. So let's talk about from at least 20 years old onwards, right? But that person is held accountable for his actions. But some things the person was brought up doing, right? He was brought up that way. Yeah, he didn't really have, as it were, a choice. He's not holding. He could theoretically change those things, but it's going to take a lot of work. But his base was set by his parents and his upbringing and his society and everything around. To the extent that each person is responsible for that, they get apportioned that blame or that credit. Now, like I said, that's a cosmic accounting we can't do. I wouldn't know how to say, to what extent am I responsible for the fact that my society allows X, Y, and Z? Yeah, I don't know, but there is an extent. Could I have done something about it? Yes, maybe not. But should I have done more? Maybe yes, maybe no. Whatever that is. So if you think about it, it has to be like this. Otherwise, it would be tremendously unfair.
Wait, a person acquires this Yitzhak at 20? Or 12?
At 12, but you're held accountable for certain things from the age of 20. I'm setting it at age 20 just to...
Oh, okay, I see. So
just to make everything... Just saying, from when he attains his... Now he's his own person. There's nothing,
Right. Okay, so
he's going to get held accountable for everything, and he has to. So at that stage, there's a certain amount of him that's been made up by other people, a certain amount that he's worked on himself, but there's certain parts of him which really are not his fault, and certain parts which are his fault, and all of that is worked out. It kind of has to be, right? So I don't know. The important thing is that we realize that the spheres of influence of a person are very, very wide. Right? You have, and they themselves influence other people. So every person that I influences somebody else, influences somebody else, influences somebody else. I have a little part in that. Which is, you could drive yourself a little nuts thinking about this, because it means every tiny little action, every blink of the eye can have positive, negative consequences, and somehow I'm going to have to, face all that. But it means that, you have to take into account, especially when it comes to dealing, interpersonal stuff. Bein adam l'chaveroi, between a man and his friend. So first of all, those mitzvahs, there's a big debate about which ones are more important, the ones between man and God and ones between man and man. In some respects, some are more, some are less. But you guys know the famous idea that the first 5 commandments are between man and God, as the second 5 commandments are between man and man, even though they really aren't 10 commandments, but let's call them the 5 sayings and the 5 sayings, right? And the Rishonim count different numbers of commandments in those 10 sayings. But at least you have 5 sayings here and 5 sayings there. So there are, we have clear sources that there were 5 on each side of the tablets, 5, but that they took up equal space. That means the letters took up equal space on each side. But if you look, you'll see that there are many, many more letters in the second 5 than in the first 5, because the first 5 are all those short ones, right? Did I just make a mistake? Other way around. No. Many more in the first. Yeah, other way around. Many more in the first than in the second, right? The first one's much more wordy than the second one. The second one's all the short ones, like, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder. I just made a mistake, by the way, I'd like to say. I'd like to admit that I made a mistake, and there was no excuse for making a mistake. It wasn't because of you guys, it was because of me.
I'll edit the mistake and apology on the video, so you're fine.
Oh, good. The second half, they're much, much shorter, small words. Lo tirtzach, you shall not murder. Yeah, that's it, short. So that means, if you figure it out, that it means that the second half had to be much bigger letters. So when you looked at them, they were much bigger. The ones between man and God were written, so it comes out that the first thing, when Moses came down carrying those tablets, the first thing everyone saw were all the mitzvahs between man and God. Man and man. Made another mistake. I'm doing this on purpose now, just so I can show you that I can admit my mistakes. The second half are the bigger ones. In a certain way, those mitzvahs are more important. Why? Well, obviously, every mitzvah between man and God, between man and man, is also a mitzvah between man and God. Right? Because God himself is telling you, do these things, behave correctly between you and with another person. You should behave correctly. So every time you give someone tzedakah, every time you give a guy a smile, you're getting two things. One, God's getting happy because you're doing what he said, and two, you're making someone else happy. So we all win. But the main point that I want to make over here is that the importance of the small acts. When we walk around the yeshiva, walk around, most of our day spent in yeshiva or around the streets outside, going to buy books or whatever it is you do with your spare time. We always underestimate the complications in other people's lives. We underestimate how much they're going through and what an effect we could have by really, really small things. Just listening. And especially in the country which unfortunately is often torn apart by internal strife. Right? This is one of the saddest things in Israel, is if we don't have enough enemies, that there's conflict between certain parts of the Jewish people. So walking around Jerusalem, especially when there are people who are not religious people, so they tend to sometimes, you find that they will have let's say preconceptions or preconceived notions about religious people, and a smile, that goes a long way. A small smile, a comment, help people, help people out. It's a big kiddush Hashem when people see somebody who's wearing a yarmulke, someone who's a yeshiva bacher, behaving in a way that he should behave like that anyway. Shouldn't be just for this ulterior motive, but at least that much. And people should see that those of us who are in yeshiva, we're trying to work on ourselves and we're trying to get better. And it's a very important thing to remember. Purim, which I'm not going to talk about, is a time when it's a very high time, a very special time of ahava. Time of coming close to Hashem through ahava, through love. And one of the ways of showing that, especially love through others, and unity. And the way to defeat Amalek is unity, is being together. And it's something which we lack so much. Something we have to work on, all of us have to work on. I'm talking to myself primarily, but you guys, if you want to take some muscle from that, you can. The Pirkei Avos says a person should do tshuva, should work on himself, should work on things. Yom echad lifnei misascha. One day before his death, but you should do tshuva a day before your death. So is that a useful thing to tell me? No, because I don't know when I'm going to die, right?
Do it every day.
So what does it mean? Classic. Do it every day, because one day before your death. Okay, so say do tshuva before your death. Why say do tshuva a day before your death? Yom echad. It's not even, in Hebrew. It's not a day. It's one day. Yom echad lifnei misascha.
So we'll mess up between them and your death.
Say again?
So you won't do any Averas between when you do tshuva and your death.
Why wouldn't you do Averos now in that time? Because? So say 1 hour. Say
You didn't have the chance to do tshuva for them.
Okay, you wouldn't have the chance if you. So that's the basic. The basic charges.
It covers you on both ends. It'll prevent you from doing tshuva between now and your death.
Okay,
and
very
also, good. Because you have to do it every day because you don't know when you're going to die. So it actually is a very clever way of covering all your bases.
Very nice. Okay, I'll tell you an extra little insight from the Radomska Rebbe. His name was the Tifer Shlomo. His name was I think don't remember his name. Rabinovitz maybe. Rabinovitz. Anyway, he lived in the 19th century in Poland, the city of Radomsk, which this Hasidus lasted like 4 generations, and then the whole place was wiped out by the Nazis, Yimach Shemam. But he wrote a sefer called the Tiferes Shlomo, and in there he comments on this Mishnah, and he writes that Yom Echad Lifnei Misascha, your whole approach has to be that this day is one day before my death. That every day you should view as, this is my last day. And then all the stuff which you think is important, right, will somehow not have so much importance. You put things into perspective. If you think that, let's imagine tomorrow at 1:30, that's it. My time's gone. So then that's gonna get a person to behave the way that he should. And if a person, in fact, the words of the Tiferes Shlomo is that if a person is able to think like this, it's very hard. So if you're able to think like this, you will for sure be a tzaddik gamor, complete tzaddik. So, okay, we can't necessarily get there immediately, but we can start working towards that. If you realize, what's the idea? You realize that your lifespan is limited. You realize you have a limited amount of time. You know, none of us is here forever. Right? We'd like to delude ourselves into thinking that we are, but we're not. So if you can remember that this ends, and it could end sooner rather than later, that means this is the time. This is the time to fix it. And particularly this thing, before Purim, this is the thing to emphasize. The love between you, your family, people here in the Shiva, people in the wider community. And if you keep doing that and you have those little smiles and those little, helping people out, then that radiates outward in, ever increasing concentric circles. And before you know it, you're affecting the whole community and, please God, the whole world. So it should be a good message.
That's only interpersonally, though, if you don't have long-term goals.
Yeah, of course.
Because
That of course. But we can only focus on one thing at once. I mean, I can. Yeah, Bernie, you wanted to ask something? You had your hand up.
Oh, no, never mind. I was just kind of thinking that, like, it doesn't want the bearer to be the cause of your death. I was thinking with that thought, like, maybe that would be the reason you died, going out on a bad note.
Oh, you don't want to be, yeah, that could well be. You don't want to do that. That wouldn't be good.
So
Happy birthday, by the way.
Oh, thank you. And then the other thing I was thinking is, like, it's kind of hard to convince yourself of something that's that outlandish, though. Like, how do you truly convince yourself that you're going to die tomorrow?
So that's why he says it's pretty tough, but I think that what he means is, because he says clearly, if a person could do this, and he says, if it were possible to do this, then you would be a tzaddik gomer. Okay, so for most of us, being complete utter tzaddik is like, that's on the horizon. We hope that it'll be there, but it's not quite, not quite right in front of us. But if you can internalize some of that message, that is that this does not go on forever. There's going to come a time where the line's going to be drawn, and I want to be able to look back and say I achieved whatever it is. And you say, how do I do that? And so that if you have that approach all the time, that my time, basically the approach is my time is limited. I shared with some of you guys, I think at Mishmar last week, the Rav Moshe Feinstein's famous dictum. He said that the world says that time is money, but for a Jew, money is time. Right? Your base currency is time. All you have in this world is time. Any money that you have is basically frozen time. It's time that you took and made into money, and now you have it, and now you can spend it on whatever you need. But it's your time, right? So most people think of it in terms of, I have money, so don't waste my, but really what we mean is, no. What I have is, all I have is time. That is who I am. That's my entire potential, my entire everything. So if I take that and convert it into money, good. I may need that money for something. But if I overspend my time in acquiring money, so I'm not spending my time on other things.
That's why so many Jews are watch dealers.
Very good. Listen, a Jew's way of thinking should be like that. A Jew's way of waking up in the morning should be, I have 12 hours today, or however many hours you plan to be awake, 16 hours today, and what am I going to do with it? How many hours am I spending earning money? How many hours am I spending learning? How many hours am I spending, chilling out? How many? You have to be worked out. That's your life. You need a master plan. You need a game plan. I see people are coming in, so we better end it there.